This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. If everybody thought the world would stop and things would really change for the better after the Colorado Supreme Court decided to disqualify Donald Trump and keep him off the ballot, primary and presidential in Colorado, we all had another thing coming. We got a lot more to do. First of all, there's probably going to be an appeal directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll know by the 4th of January. In addition, Donald Trump has blown the whistle and doxed terribly and mercilessly the Supreme Court justices in Colorado that went against him. And now, as a result, the Department of Justice has even reported that just this last week, at least one United States Supreme Court justice, two different FBI agents, and a presidential candidate, along with 4 justices of the Colorado Supreme Court, are all potential targets of assassination that they're trying to get to the bottom of. We'll talk about that in one place and one place only. Legal AF on the MeidasTouch Network. Take a listen to our most recent episode.
If you just look at the 14th Amendment, you have to ask yourself just some basic questions. Number one, was Donald Trump an officer? Is the presidency an office? And then number 2, was Donald Trump involved in an insurrection against the Constitution? Was he aiding and abetting, facilitating, supporting an insurrection? I don't know how you can objectively answer to any of those questions. No. That the office of the presidency is somehow not an office, that he's not an officer, or that he was not involved in an insurrection that day. And so really, you could go through this 133-page ruling by the Colorado Supreme Court, where in a 4-3 decision, they ruled that Trump should be disqualified, and they disqualified him from the Colorado ballot, although they stayed their order pending Donald Trump's ability to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. But to me, it's a fundamentally very simple analysis. The Secretary of State is the one who decides whether someone meets the threshold qualifications. One of those qualifications is embodied in the United States Constitution. It's in the 14th Amendment, Section 3. 14th Amendment, Section 3, simple. That's it. That's what it says. You're disqualified. And Donald Trump's response to that shows why he should be disqualified. He goes on his social media platform. He posts the photographs of the 4 judges who are now receiving, and not only that, he amplifies the people on his social media platform who attack those justices, and now they're all subject to death threats. And the message that Donald Trump sends is, hey, if you don't want to be involved, if you don't want to get these death threats, if you don't want your life ruined, if you don't want all of these things to happen to you, do what the trial court judge did, right? Do what Judge Sarah Wallace did in the Colorado trial court, who said, yeah, I'm an insurrectionist, but she found on some technicality not to disqualify me. But think about that. You have any doubt that she would be receiving all of these death threats right now? Her family would be targeted if she ruled the other way. I think she knew what the law was. I think she knew what she had to do. I think she got scared. And that's the thing. Like, we're not seeing, to your point, Popok, just different kind of legal views and the normal process of how cases, used to get argued. I mean, fundamentally, you have Donald Trump who's arguing for the end of our judicial system. And that putting this episode back full circle is ultimately the unstated issue in Special Counsel Jack Smith's brief to the Supreme Court, and what the Supreme Court has to recognize. Okay, Supreme Court, you've taken away the reproductive freedoms of women. Okay, Supreme Court, you very quickly struck down President Biden's attempt to provide targeted relief to individuals who had student loans. Okay, Supreme Court, you are, demolishing the separation between, church and state. Okay, Supreme Court, you're allowing weapons to happen throughout the country. All right, you view those issues with urgency. But then when it comes to the issue of fundamentally destroying our democracy, even if you're waiting 20 or 30 days and you're like, yeah, we'll wait what the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals says. As I said from the outset of the episode, it's why I don't believe that the Supreme Court's order for now is anything that causes me any degree of kind of worry or consternation right now. But nonetheless, as a human being, when the Supreme Court's like, yeah, we'll just wait. We'll see what the D.C. Circuit says. And we are all living in this MAGA dystopian threats of destroying American democracy. We're like, that's nice that you want to wait 3 weeks, Supreme Court, to hear it when it comes back from the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. But you realize that while Jack Smith has to play by the rules, Trump is apparently just threatening judges and their families and their kids, and MAGA's threatening all of them, and they're talking about sending people to Guantanamo Bay and this and that. And that's, one of the things that all these MAGAs are talking about with these justices in Colorado. It's horrific. Popok, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, and I did a hot take on this one. They get a couple of things going on with Colorado that I think are very interesting. The headlines were all, as you said, Colorado Supreme Court rules to ban Donald Trump from the ballot. And everybody's going to be shocked then when Donald Trump wins the primary in March. Like, oh, what happened? Well, what happened is they built in a already self-executing stay into the order, basically blocking their ban, right? Continuing to talk about legal terms. They're blocking their own ban to allow Donald Trump, if he files by the 4th of January, a Supreme Court appeal, which he's going to do to the U.S. Supreme Court. So now we've got two feeds being plugged into the Supreme Court at the same time. They're going to have to decide on an appeal whether the Colorado Supreme Court in their 4-3 decision were right or wrong, first time in our republic, to decide how that 14th Amendment Article 3 applies to a guy who used to be president, and whether he held an office under the Constitution, agreed to defend, support, or otherwise, whatever to the Constitution, if his relationship with the Constitution was appropriate enough to apply it to it. Two of the dissenters, who happened to be Republicans on the 4-3 Colorado Supreme Court, wanted to go a different way. One wanted to go the way of, why don't we let Congress decide this, which is what Minnesota and Michigan Supreme Courts had done. This seems like a really hard decision. Why are we doing this at the judiciary in our state, or doing it through the Secretary of State of our state? Let Congress do it. They're the ones that put the disqualifier in there. Let them decide whether he can be on the presidential ballot or not. Seems really hard. We don't want to do that. I think that's a abdication of responsibility by justices to, as the trial court judge said, we get paid to look at the law, apply the Constitution to the law, and make decisions. That's what we get paid to do. The other dissenting judge said a version of, no, I think there needs to be a criminal conviction of somebody like Donald Trump before we even get to the point of deciding whether the 14th Amendment comes up. In other words, the criminal justice system should decide on a charge of rebellion or insurrection. And there's those kind of charges out there that were not used for good reason by the Department of Justice. And why didn't they use those charges? And they should use those charges. And let's just have that come back after there's an actual conviction of Donald Trump. Very similar to what a judge had done when people tried to get Marjorie Taylor Greene off the ballot back in the day in Georgia. Much lower level administrative law judge said the same thing, which is like, shouldn't there be a conviction for that count? And to which I respond, as I've said before, under the history and legislative history of the 14th Amendment, the answer to and Article 3, the answer is no, because there was no way, and you can tell from the legislative history when it was being debated, that they would ever have required that members of the Confederacy, like, Jeff Davis and others, would have to go through a public trial and get a conviction in order for them to get banned from the ballot on the next election cycle coming up. They were never going to put the U.S. through, the U.S. coming off of the civil war in this country, brother against brother, right? Blue versus gray, splitting the country in half. This sounds familiar. And comparing that to the Reconstruction, trying to put the country literally back together again with an assassination of a president in the middle named Abraham Lincoln, they weren't going to say, well, it's one more step, because they would have baked that into the 14th Amendment. You got to have a conviction. They didn't say convicted. It says if the person engaged, not engaged, proven at a trial, engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution. And so that falls by the wayside. Now, the two feeders that are coming into the Supreme Court at the same time that could lead to a horse trade by John Roberts, and it's the thrust of a hot take that I just did, is that you've got this decision, whether once and for all it applies to a president, the 14th Amendment disqualifier, and what kind of facts do you need to have developed in order to apply it up at the Supreme Court. At the same time, that the issue ultimately of absolute immunity for presidential prosecution or prosecution of a president comes in at the same time at the Supreme Court. Now, you know that Roberts is going to be running around trying to get the votes and broker a deal. And one deal that could happen is everybody gets something. It's like Christmas. Everybody gets something in their stocking. Donald Trump gets a ruling that he can't be banned from the ballots. Okay. Thumbs up or thumbs down, state by state electoral vote, whether Donald Trump or Joe Biden win in November. Mano a mano. Let's do it. Okay. I can probably live with that, and a lot of Democrats can. However, in order to get that vote, they got to give something to Jack Smith. And the thing they give to Jack Smith is, at this stage in the game, absolute presidential immunity for crimes that are charged, even for somebody that part of those same activities as the subject of an impeachment that didn't lead to a conviction. No way. That's not going to be the law of our land. And we're going to see some potential horse trading. There's no way that these two cases are just coming in by accident. As we've said in past podcasts, the Supreme Court does nothing by accident. Whether they decide to hear something, not hear something, the timing of it, the decision whether to punt on the issue, whether to claim the election is too close or too far away. All of these things go in. This is all a political game strategy that we are watching among the 9 justices in the Supreme Court and their clerks. It's just what we're watching. And so these two things landing at the simultaneous time on purpose, these two planes landing, are going to have to be addressed. And maybe there's going to be a trade-off between those two things. In the meantime, as you started the transition into this segment, we've got an out-of-control Donald Trump and his MAGA blowing the dog whistle, calling for violence against these 4, yes, Democratic-appointed majority of the Colorado Supreme Court. That's what people in their state get to do. They get to pick their judges and the governors of their states, and that's democracy in action. That's what happens, and it's okay that a person's of a certain political party. But there's so much violent rhetoric being directed towards them that the FBI and the Department of Justice have now intervened because of violent threats of assassination, and worse, if you can believe it, against those justices who have been horribly doxxed again by Donald Trump, who can't help put their picture up along with everybody else's picture. Here's a version of his picture: Colorado election interference, the 4 judges, and then all the information about them. Some of the stuff I read on the darkest web, including thedonaldwin.com, which has already been outed as a major source of fomenting and promoting and coordinating Jan 6th insurrection, let alone what's going on now, I won't repeat it. But Lisa Monaco, I'll leave it on this. Lisa Monaco, the Deputy Attorney General, number 2 under Merrick Garland, in an interview that she's giving this weekend, we got some early reports of it. She's revealed that the threat level assessment is so high right now because of Donald Trump that in this last week alone, listen to this, Ben. This last week alone, the FBI and the Department of Justice is investigating assassination threats against a sitting U.S. Supreme Court justice, not named, 2 presidential candidates, an FBI agent, and all 4 members of the Colorado Supreme Court. And that's just a week. Well, if you like, on a regular basis, lawyers talking about things at the intersection of law, politics, and justice, that they know what they're talking about, you've reached the right spot on the dial. This is MeidasTouch's Legal AF. We do it on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, one place, right here on the MeidasTouch Network. And then you can pick us up on audio podcast platforms of your choice. We sit at that intersection of law, politics, and justice so that you don't have to. And then the leaders of Legal AF, in addition to the podcast, we do hourly updates on law and politics and justice, on hot takes just like this one, also on the MeidasTouch Network. If you know what I'm talking about, welcome back. We appreciate you being along for the journey on Legal AF. If you have no idea who I am and what I'm talking about, I'm Michael Popok. That was Legal AF, and we invite you to join us on our next episode. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Thanks so much for watching. We're only a few subscribers short of 2 million subs. Please subscribe right now to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel for free and help us grow this unapologetically pro-democracy network.